Admiral Vexstar stood before the massive holographic display in the war room of his flagship. The blue light from the projection cast strange shadows across his scaled face. Around him, the finest military minds of the Zephyrine hegemony waited for his words. They had been planning this moment for 6 months. "Today, we end the human threat," Vexstar said, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had won 100 battles. "Today, we show the galaxy that these primitive mammals are nothing more than lucky fools." The hologram showed the Kepler 442 star system. According to their intelligence, it was one of the most important human supply depots in this sector. Ships came and went constantly, carrying food, weapons, and fuel to the human war machine. But more importantly, it looked almost defenseless. General Crixon, Vexstar's oldest friend and most trusted advisor, stepped forward. "Are we certain the humans have not discovered our fleet?" His voice carried the careful tone of someone who had learned to question everything in war. Vexstar smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. "Impossible. Our cloaking technology is beyond their understanding. We have been hiding in the asteroid field for 3 weeks. Their primitive sensors cannot detect us." The plan was simple and brilliant. For months, they had been feeding false information to human spies. They made Kepler 442 look like an easy target. They had even pulled most of their real defenses away from the system. When the humans arrived to attack what they thought was a weak supply depot, Vexstar would spring his trap. Hidden in the asteroid field beyond the system's edge were 300 Zephyrian warships. It was the largest fleet the hegemony had ever assembled. When the humans committed to their attack, Vexstar would reveal his ships and destroy them all. The human fleet would be trapped between his forces and the planet. There would be nowhere to run. "The humans are predictable," Vexstar continued, turning to address all the officers in the room. "They see an opportunity and charge forward without thinking. They lack patience. They lack proper planning. This is why they will lose." Commander Zethal, the youngest officer present, raised a clawed hand. "Admiral, what if this is also a trap? The humans have surprised us before." The room fell silent. Every Zephyrian officer remembered the Battle of Wolf 359, where a small human force had somehow defeated a much larger Zephyrian fleet. The humans had used tactics that made no sense, attacking from directions that should have been impossible. Vexstar's expression darkened. Wolf 359 was a fluke. We underestimated their willingness to sacrifice themselves. This time, we have planned for everything. Our intelligence is perfect. Our trap is perfect. The humans will walk into it like animals walking into a slaughterhouse. The Admiral touched the control, and the hologram changed to show the positions of human ships throughout the sector. Red dots marked enemy vessels, while blue dots showed Zephyrian forces. The humans looked scattered and weak. "Look at them," Vexstar said with disgust. "They spread their ships too thin. They try to defend everything and end up defending nothing. When we destroy their fleet at Kepler 442, the rest will fall like dominoes." 3 days later, the moment finally arrived. Sensors detected a large human fleet approaching the edge of the Kepler 442 system. Vexstar watched from his command chair as dozens of human ships dropped out of hyperspace. They moved in the loose formations typical of human forces, looking disorganized compared to the tight Zephyrian battle groups. "Admiral," reported his sensor officer, "we count 47 human vessels. Mix of cruisers, destroyers, and support ships. No dreadnoughts detected." Vexstar nodded with satisfaction. The humans had taken the bait completely. They thought they were attacking a weakly defended supply depot with their entire regional fleet. Instead, they had just entered the largest trap in galactic history. "Signal all ships," he ordered. "Maintain cloak until my command." Let them commit fully to the attack before we reveal ourselves. On the main screen, he watched the human ships begin their approach toward the planet. They moved carefully but confidently. Admiral Chun, the human fleet commander, was known for being cautious, but even she could not resist what looked like such a perfect opportunity. The Zephyrian admiral had studied every human commander extensively. Chun was considered one of their best, but she had weaknesses. She was too protective of her crews. She avoided taking casualties, even when necessary. This made her predictable. "Human ships are engaging our decoy defenses," reported the tactical officer. "They appear to be committing their full force to the assault." Vexstar watched as the human ships spread out and began attacking the fake defensive platforms around Kepler 442. His engineers had done excellent work making them look real. The platforms even exploded properly when hit, sending debris in all directions. The humans were fighting what they thought was a real battle. Their ships moved with purpose, targeting what looked like the most important installations first. They had no idea that everything they were shooting at was worthless. "Sir, the human flagship is moving to attack the orbital shipyard," the sensor officer reported. Admiral Chun appears to be following standard human tactics. Perfect. Once Chun's flagship was committed to attacking the fake shipyard, she would be too far from the system's edge to escape when the trap was sprung. The other human ships would be scattered across the system. Easy targets for his concentrated fleet. Vexstar allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. After months of careful planning and preparation, victory was finally within reach. The humans had walked into his trap exactly as predicted. Their primitive minds could not comprehend the level of strategic thinking that the Zephyrian hegemony brought to warfare. "Admiral," General Crixon said quietly, "shall we begin?" Vexstar looked at the tactical display one more time. The human ships were spread throughout the system, attacking his fake targets with typical human aggression. There was no way they could escape what was coming. "Signal all ships," he commanded, his voice carrying across the bridge. "Prepare to decloak on my mark. Today, we end the human threat forever." The bridge crew moved with practiced efficiency. Every officer knew their role in what was about to become the most important victory in Zephyrian history. The trap was set. The prey was caught. All that remained was to spring it. Vexstar smiled as he prepared to give the order that would change the war forever. "All ships, decloak now," Vexstar commanded. The asteroid field erupted with light as 300 Zephyrian warships suddenly appeared. Their hulls gleamed like silver daggers in the darkness of space. Weapon systems powered up with deadly energy, painting the void with streams of plasma and particle beams. Vexstar watched the tactical display with savage satisfaction. The human ships were scattered across the Kepler 442 system, too far apart to support each other properly. His fleet was concentrated and ready for battle. The trap was perfect. "Human ships are attempting to regroup," reported the tactical officer. "They appear surprised by our presence." Of course they were surprised. How could these primitive mammals have detected the most advanced cloaking technology in the galaxy? The Zephyrian fleet had been completely invisible for weeks. "Target their flagship first," Vexstar ordered. "Once we destroy Admiral Chun, the rest will fall apart." Humans always panic when they lose their leaders. The Zephyrian ships moved forward in perfect formation. Each battle group knew exactly where to go and what to do. This was how real military forces operated, not like the chaos the humans called tactics. Plasma cannons opened fire across millions of kilometers of space. The first volleys lit up the darkness as Zephyrian weapons reached out toward the human fleet. But something was wrong. The human ships were not panicking. They were not running in random directions like frightened animals. Instead, they moved with purpose. The scattered formations suddenly began to make sense as human ships started supporting each other with overlapping fields of fire. What had looked like poor positioning was actually a carefully planned defense. "Sir," the sensor officer called out, his voice confused. "I'm getting strange readings from the human ships. Their energy signatures are not what we expected." Vexstar frowned. "Explain." "The power levels are much lower than they should be for ships of that size. And their mass readings are inconsistent with our intelligence reports." General Crixon stepped closer to the Admiral. "Could our information be wrong?" Before Vexstar could answer, a new voice cut across all communication channels. It was calm, confident, and very human. Admiral Chun was speaking directly to the Zephyrian fleet. "Admiral Vexstar," the human woman said, her voice carrying clearly through the translator systems. "I hope you enjoyed your hiding spot in the asteroids. We've been watching you for 3 weeks." The bridge fell silent. That was impossible. The Zephyrian fleet had been completely cloaked. Their technology was centuries ahead of anything humans possessed. "You set a good trap," Chan continued. "Very clever, using false intelligence to make us think Kepler 442 was important. Too bad you forgot one thing about humans." Vexstar found his voice. "What?" he demanded. "We're paranoid." Suddenly, the human ships began to shimmer and fade. One by one, they became transparent and then vanished completely. Not destroyed, just gone, as if they had never been there at all. "What is happening?" Vexstar roared at his officers. "Where did they go?" The tactical officer's hands flew over his controls. "Sir, I don't understand. All human ships have disappeared from sensors. It's like they were never there." General Crixon stared at the empty space where the human fleet had been moments before. "Holograms," he whispered. They were all holograms. The truth hit Vexstar like a physical blow. The human ships they had been watching were not real. They were elaborate illusions, light and energy shaped to look like warships. While his fleet had been preparing to attack phantoms, the real human force was somewhere else entirely. "Find them!" he screamed. Full sensor sweep. "They have to be hiding somewhere." Admiral Chun's voice came again, now with a hint of amusement. "Oh, we're not hiding, Admiral. We're right where we've always been. You just never thought to look in the obvious place." "Sir," the sensor officer called out, his voice shaking. "I'm detecting massive energy signatures. Multiple contacts, closing from all directions." The tactical display lit up with new contacts. Dozens of human ships appeared on sensors, but not where they should be. They were coming from impossible directions, some rising from the planet's atmosphere, others emerging from the system's asteroid belt, and more dropping out of hyperspace at point-blank range. "How?" Vexstar demanded. "Our sensors would have detected any cloaked ships." Chen's laugh was cold. "Your sensors were designed to detect your own cloaking technology, Admiral. Ours works differently. The human ships opened fire without warning. Missile swarms erupted from launch tubes while energy weapons reached out across space. But these were not the weak attacks Vexstar expected from human technology. These weapons hit with devastating force, punching through Zephyrian shields like they were made of paper. Shields at 60%. Reported the defensive officer. "How are their weapons so powerful?" More human ships kept appearing. They seemed to come from everywhere at once, behind the moon, from within the planet's rings, even from the direction of the star itself. It was as if the entire system had been hiding a massive human fleet. "Impossible," Vexstar muttered. "We surveyed this system completely. There were no ships here except the fake depot. You surveyed it with sensors designed to find Zephyrian technology." Chun replied, somehow still monitoring their communications. "You never thought to look for human innovations. A massive explosion rocked the Zephyrian flagship as human missiles found their target. The bridge lights flickered, and several control panels sparked with electrical overloads. "Sir," the tactical officer shouted over the alarms. "The humans are using our own cloaking frequencies against us. They're tracking our ships through our own stealth systems." Vexstar felt cold fear creep up his spine. The humans had not just avoided his trap, they had turned it completely around. While he had been preparing to ambush them, they had been setting an ambush of their own. The battle that followed was unlike anything in Zephyrian military history. Human ships moved in patterns that made no sense according to standard military doctrine. They attacked from unexpected angles, used their smaller size to hide behind asteroids and debris, and coordinated their attacks with a flexibility that Zephyrian commanders could not match. "They're not following any logical battle plan," General Crixon observed as he watched the tactical display. "How can we counter tactics that make no sense?" That was when Vexstar began to understand the horrible truth. The humans were not fighting a battle according to military rules. They were fighting like predators who had evolved on a world where everything tried to kill them. They used every advantage, exploited every weakness, and adapted to changing conditions faster than Zephyrian commanders could react. "Admiral," the communication officer reported, his voice filled with panic. "We're receiving surrender requests from 12 ships. Captain Frolix reports that his engines are destroyed and he's losing life support." Vexstar looked at the tactical display in disbelief. His perfect trap had become a perfect disaster. The humans had outmaneuvered him completely, and now his fleet was being torn apart by an enemy he had thought primitive and predictable. Chun's voice cut through the chaos one more time. "Now you see us, Admiral. Now you don't. The question is, do you want to keep playing this game?" Vexstar gripped the arms of his command chair as another explosion shook his flagship. The perfect trap he had spent months planning was collapsing around him. Human ships darted between his formations like deadly insects, striking hard and vanishing before his weapons could lock onto them. "How did they know?" he demanded, turning to General Crixon. "How did they see through months of careful planning?" Before his old friend could answer, Admiral Chun's voice filled the bridge again. But this time, she was not speaking to the entire fleet. Her transmission was directed specifically at Vexstar's flagship. "Would you like to know the truth, Admiral?" Chun asked. "I think you've earned that much. Tell me," Vexstar growled. "Your trap was perfect," Chun admitted. "The false intelligence, the hidden fleet, the fake vulnerability of Kepler 442. Any reasonable military commander would have taken the bait." "Then how?" "Because humans are not reasonable," Chun interrupted. 3 months ago, my intelligence officers brought me reports about Zephyrian troop movements near this sector. The data suggested you were planning something big, but we couldn't figure out what. Vexstar listened despite the battle raging around them. Something in the human admiral's voice suggested this was important. "So I did what humans do best," Chung continued. "I assumed the worst possible scenario. I assumed that everything we knew was wrong, that every piece of intelligence was a lie, and that someone was trying to kill us in the most clever way possible." "Paranoia," General Crixon muttered. "Exactly," Chun replied, somehow hearing him. "Paranoia. You studied our ships, our weapons, our tactics, but you never studied our psychology. Humans have been trying to kill each other for thousands of years. We know every trick in the book because we invented most of them." On the tactical display, Vexstar watched another Zephyrian cruiser explode under concentrated human fire. His fleet was being systematically destroyed by forces that seemed to know exactly where to hit and when. "So I asked myself," Chan went on, "what would I do if I wanted to lure the human fleet into a trap? I would make something look vulnerable when it really wasn't. I would hide my forces where the enemy couldn't see them. And I would feed false information to make sure they took the bait. The supply depot, Vexstar realized. It really was worthless. Completely. We abandoned Kepler 442 2 weeks before you started planning your attack. Everything you saw was a fake installation designed to make you think it was important. The question was, where would you hide your fleet for the ambush? Vexstar felt sick. The asteroid field. The only logical place. Good cover. Close enough to respond quickly. Far enough away to avoid detection by standard sensors. So we came here early and started watching. Your cloaking technology is impressive, but it has one weakness. What weakness? Vexstar demanded. Heat, Chen said simply. Your ships generate massive amounts of thermal energy. Your cloaking systems hide you from most sensors, but they can't eliminate heat signature completely. All we had to do was look for the warm spots in a cold asteroid field. The Zephyrian admiral stared at his tactical display in horror. His supposedly invisible fleet had been sitting under observation for weeks. The humans had known exactly where they were and how many ships they had. But that's not the best part, Chung continued, and Vexstar could hear the smile in her voice. Once we knew you were planning an ambush, we decided to plan one of our own. The holograms, General Crixon said. Advanced projection systems mounted on automated drones, Chung confirmed. We've been developing the technology for years. Amazing what you can do when you assume everyone is trying to trick you. The fake ships looked real enough to fool your sensors, and they followed pre-programmed attack patterns. Another massive explosion lit up space as two Zephyrian destroyers collided while trying to avoid human missiles. The battle was becoming a complete disaster. While you were watching our fake fleet attack your fake depot, Chun explained, our real ships were positioning themselves throughout the system. We used your own focus against you. You were so busy watching the obvious that you missed everything else. Where are you broadcasting from? Vexstar asked. Your flagship should be in the middle of the battle. I'm exactly where I've been for the past month, Chun replied. Hiding in the one place your ships can't follow. The main screen shifted to show the system's star. It was a young, hot star that burned with intense radiation. No Zephyrian ship could survive close to that kind of heat for more than a few minutes. Impossible, Vexstar breathed. No ship can survive in a star's corona. Zephyrian ships can't, Chung corrected. Your silicon-based technology breaks down under extreme heat. But human ships use different materials. With the right shielding, we can hide in places you would never think to look. The tactical display updated to show a massive human carrier emerging from the star's outer atmosphere. It was 3 times the size of any ship in Vexstar's fleet, and had been hiding in plain sight the entire time. We discovered your heat vulnerability 6 months ago, Chun explained. Captured technology from the Battle of Proxima Station. Your own engineers were very helpful, even if they didn't know they were helping. You interrogated our prisoners, General Crixon accused. We offered them better food and medical care, Chung corrected. Amazing how talkative people become when you treat them well instead of torturing them. Your pilots told us everything about your technology's limitations. Vexstar felt the weight of complete defeat settling on his shoulders. The humans had not just outfought him, they had outhauled him at every level. While he had been planning one trap, they had been planning a dozen. Your mistake was thinking like a Zephyrian, Chun said. You assumed we would react the way your people would react. You planned for the battle you wanted to fight, not the battle we were preparing. Fighter squadrons launched from the human carrier, swarming toward the remaining Zephyrian ships like angry hornets. But these were not the weak human fighters Vexstar expected. They moved faster than anything in his fleet and hit harder than ships twice their size. Modified engines, Chun explained, apparently reading his thoughts. We've been working on improvements ever since we realized your ships were faster than ours. Turns out, it's not that hard when you're willing to sacrifice crew comfort for performance. Admiral, the tactical officer reported, his voice shaking. We've lost 60% of the fleet. Our remaining ships are requesting permission to retreat. Vextar looked at the display showing the destruction of his forces. Ships that had taken months to build were being torn apart in minutes. The most powerful fleet in Zephyrian history was being defeated by an enemy they had thought primitive. You want to know the really funny part? Chun asked. This isn't even our main fleet. These are just the ships we could spare for a training exercise. Training exercise. Vextar repeated numbly. We needed to test our new cloaking technology and battle tactics. Your trap provided the perfect opportunity. My superiors send their thanks for the excellent training scenario. The words hit Vextar like physical blows. His masterpiece of military planning had been nothing more than a training exercise for the humans. They had used his own trap as practice for their new weapons and tactics. The war is over, Admiral, Chun said, her voice becoming serious. You can keep fighting and lose more ships, or you can surrender and save the crews you still have. What's it going to be? Vextar stared at the tactical display as his perfect fleet fell apart around him. Red markers showed destroyed Zephyrian ships, while blue contacts marked human forces that seemed to appear from nowhere. Every few seconds, another red marker winked out of existence. I will not surrender, he declared, his voice carrying across the bridge. Signal all ships. Fight to the last. Admiral, General Crixon said quietly, perhaps we should consider. No. Vextar roared. The hegemony does not bow to inferior species. We are the greatest military force in the galaxy. Admiral Chun's voice came through the communication system again, calm and patient. I was hoping you wouldn't say that. My tactical officers have been wanting to test some new ideas. What happened next would be studied in military academies for generations. The human fleet did not attack like any force Vextar had ever seen. Instead of the organized formations typical of space combat, they moved like a pack of predators. Captain Torres of the human destroyer Perseverance led the first assault. His ship dove toward a group of Zephyrian cruisers, but instead of firing weapons, he did something that made no sense. He activated his ship's artificial gravity generators at full power and used them to grab onto a piece of asteroid debris. What is he doing? The tactical officer asked in confusion. Torres swung the asteroid like a club, using his ship's momentum to hurl the massive rock at incredible speed. The debris smashed through the shields of a Zephyrian cruiser and cracked its hull like an egg. Impossible, General Crixon whispered. Ships don't fight that way. Human ships do, Chun replied, her voice carrying a hint of pride. Captain Torres grew up in the asteroid belts around Saturn. He knows how to use gravity and momentum better than most people know how to walk. More human ships began using similar tactics. They grabbed debris, used planetary gravity to slingshot around obstacles, and turned their own vessels into kinetic weapons when necessary. It was chaotic, unpredictable, and completely effective. Commander Singh coordinated a squadron of human fighters that moved like nothing Vextar had ever seen. They did not attack in straight lines or follow standard fighter doctrine. Instead, they flowed around Zephyrian defenses like water, striking weak points and vanishing before the aliens could respond. Sir, the defensive officer reported, the human fighters are using pack hunting tactics. They separate our ships from the main group and then attack from multiple angles. Vextar watched in horror as Singh's fighters surrounded one of his heavy cruisers. They did not try to destroy it with massive firepower. Instead, they attacked specific systems, engines, sensors, weapons, leaving the ship helpless but alive. They're disabling our vessels instead of destroying them, the tactical officer observed. Why would they do that? Because they want prisoners, Chun explained. Your crews have information we need about your technology, your tactics, your home worlds. Dead people can't answer questions. The human approach to warfare was completely alien to Zephyrian thinking. The hegemony fought to destroy enemies completely. Humans fought to win, and they were willing to use any method that worked. Commander Rodriguez brought her stealth corvette Shadow, denser and close to Vextar's flagship. Instead of attacking directly, she used her ship's electronic warfare systems to jam Zephyrian communications. Suddenly, the hegemony fleet could not coordinate their movements. Communications are down across the fleet. The communication officer reported, "I can't reach our other ships." "How?" Vextar demanded. "Our communication systems are encrypted with quantum algorithms." "Your algorithms assume the enemy is using similar technology," Chun replied. "But humans developed our electronics differently. We can break your codes because we don't think the way you think." Without communication, the Zephyrian fleet began to fall apart. Ships that had fought together for years suddenly could not coordinate their attacks. They bunched up in some areas and left gaps in others, making them easy targets for human weapons. Captain Liu Wei brought the heavy cruiser, Beijing around the edge of the battle zone, and opened fire with weapons that should not have existed. Instead of energy beams or standard missiles, his ship launched projectiles that moved at incredible speed. Railguns, the tactical officer identified. But they're firing at velocities I've never seen before. "We've made some improvements," Chun said casually. "Turns out you can get amazing results when you're willing to sacrifice everything for raw power." The railgun projectiles punched through Zephyrian shields and armor like they were made of paper. But more importantly, they caused massive electromagnetic pulses that disabled ship systems across wide areas. "Sir, we're losing ships faster than we can count," the tactical officer reported. His voice was starting to crack with stress. "The humans are using weapons and tactics we've never seen before." Vextar realized with growing horror that the humans were not just winning. They were experimenting. Each attack used different methods, different approaches, different technologies. His fleet was being used as a testing ground for human innovations. "Admiral Chun," he called out over the communication system, "you cannot seriously expect to win this war with such small numbers." Chen's laugh was cold. "Small numbers? Admiral, you're not fighting our whole fleet. You're not even fighting our second-string ships. The forces attacking you are what we call our Rapid Response Training Squadron." "Training squadron?" General Crixon repeated in disbelief. "Ships and crews we use to test new equipment and practice unconventional tactics," Chen explained. "Most of these captains have been in space for less than 2 years. Our experienced commanders are handling more important targets." The words hit Vextar like hammer blows. The greatest fleet in Zephyrian history was being destroyed by human trainees. If this was what their inexperienced forces could do, what would their veterans be capable of? "The problem with your strategy," Chen continued, "is that you assumed we think like you do. You plan for a battle between organized fleets using standard tactics. But humans don't fight that way." Another Zephyrian ship exploded as human fighters swarmed it like angry insects. The pilots seemed to anticipate every defensive move before it happened. "We've been fighting each other for thousands of years," Chun explained. "Pirates, rebels, terrorists, criminals, and a dozen different kinds of military forces. Every human captain knows how to fight dirty because we learned from people who made dirty fighting into an art form." "Sir," the tactical officer called out desperately, "I'm reading massive energy signatures approaching from multiple vectors. More human ships are arriving." Vextar looked at his displays and felt his heart stop. Dozens of new contacts were appearing on sensors. Not the small ships that had been attacking his fleet, but massive dreadnoughts and carriers that dwarfed anything in the Zephyrian Navy. "The main fleet is arriving," Chun announced. I suggest you surrender now, while you still have ships left to surrender with. Vexstar stared at the tactical display showing the approaching human reinforcements. Each ship was larger and more powerful than his flagship. There were enough of them to crush what remained of his fleet without effort. How many ships do you have? He whispered. Enough, Chun replied simply. The question is, do you want to find out exactly how many? The bridge of Vexstar's flagship shook violently as another human missile found its target. Emergency lights bathed everything in red, and the smell of smoke filled the air. Around him, his officers worked desperately to keep the ship functioning, but everyone knew it was hopeless. Sir, the tactical officer reported, his voice barely steady. We have 17 ships left. The humans have over 200 vessels in the immediate area, with more arriving every minute. Vexstar looked at the main screen showing the human fleet. Their ships moved with deadly precision, but they were not attacking anymore. They had formed a perfect sphere around the surviving Zephyrian vessels, weapons ready, but not firing. They were waiting. Admiral Chun, Vexstar said into his communication system, I request terms for surrender. Smart choice, Chun replied. Power down your weapons and prepare to be boarded. My people will escort you to a secure location where we can talk properly. 20 minutes later, Vexstar found himself in the main conference room of Chun's flagship. The human admiral was smaller than he had expected, but her eyes held the kind of cold intelligence that made him understand why she had defeated him so completely. Please. Sit, Chun said, gesturing to a chair that had been modified for Zephyrian anatomy. Can I offer you anything? Water? Food? Why? Vexstar asked, ignoring the offer. Why are you being kind to someone who tried to destroy your fleet? Chun smiled, but it was not a cruel expression. Because you're no longer my enemy, Admiral. You're a prisoner of war, and humans have rules about how we treat prisoners. Rules that prevent you from getting information through torture? Rules that require us to treat you like a thinking being with rights, Chun corrected. Torture doesn't work anyway. People will say anything to make pain stop, whether it's true or not. Kindness and respect work much better. General Crixon, who had been brought aboard with Vexstar, spoke for the first time. You could have destroyed all our ships. Why did you disable so many instead? Because killing people doesn't end wars, Chun replied. Fear does. When word of this battle reaches the hegemony, your leaders will have to ask themselves a very important question. If this is what happens when they send their best fleet against a human training squadron, what would happen if they faced our real military? Vexstar felt cold understanding wash over him. This was a message. Everything humans do is a message, Chun agreed. The message today is simple. We know about your traps before you set them. We can counter your technology with innovations you never imagined. And we can defeat your finest forces with our beginners. How? Vexstar demanded. How did you anticipate everything we planned? How did you counter technologies that should have been beyond your understanding? Chun leaned back in her chair and studied the Zephyrian admiral for a long moment. You studied our tactics, our technology, our previous battles. But you never studied us. You never tried to understand what kind of species produces tactics like ours. Explain. Humans come from a world that spent millions of years trying to kill us, Chun began. Every animal, every plant, every change in weather was a potential threat. We survived by becoming the most paranoid, suspicious, and adaptable species in the galaxy. She touched a control, and a hologram appeared showing Earth. The blue and green world looked peaceful. But Chun's words painted a different picture. Our evolution was shaped by constant danger, she continued. We learned to see threats everywhere because threats were everywhere. We developed the ability to imagine the worst possible scenario and prepare for it. Paranoia, Crixon observed. Survival, Chun corrected. When you showed us intelligence, suggesting Kepler 442 was vulnerable, the first thing every human commander asked was, what if this is a lie? What if someone is trying to trick us? Vexstar was beginning to understand. So you prepared for a trap. We prepared for every possible trap. But more than that, we prepared to turn any trap around on whoever said it. That's what humans do. We take the weapons used against us and make them our own. Chun touched another control, and the hologram changed to show human ships using Zephyrian cloaking technology. Your stealth systems are very good, she admitted. But once we captured a few examples, our engineers figured out how they worked. Then they built better versions. How could you improve on technology that took us centuries to develop? Because we think differently, Chun said simply. Zephyrian engineering focuses on perfection within known parameters. Human engineering focuses on finding completely new approaches to old problems. The hologram showed technical diagrams comparing Zephyrian and human technology. The alien systems were elegant and sophisticated, but the human versions were crude and brutal and more effective. Your cloaking systems hide heat signatures by dispersing them gradually, Chun explained. Very elegant. Our system just moves the heat somewhere else entirely. Not as pretty, but it works better. Where do you move the heat? Chun smiled. Into bullets. Our weapons run much hotter than yours, but they hit harder too. We turned a design flaw into an advantage. Vexstar stared at the diagrams with growing horror. The humans had not just copied Zephyrian technology. They had improved it by ignoring all the rules that governed proper engineering. You want to know the real secret? Chun asked. Humans don't just prepare for the wars we're fighting. We prepare for wars we hope we'll never have to fight. What do you mean? Every human military base has weapons designed to fight enemies we've never met using tactics we've never seen. Every human ship carries equipment designed to counter threats that might not even exist. We plan for impossible scenarios because impossible things keep happening to us. She gestured to the space around them. This battle, for instance. You thought it was impossible for us to detect your cloaked fleet. You thought it was impossible for us to hide ships in a star's corona. You thought it was impossible for us to anticipate your trap. But we did it anyway, Vexstar finished quietly. Because humans have learned that impossible just means no one has figured it out yet. Chun confirmed. We've been dealing with impossible situations for so long that we've gotten very good at making them possible. The conference room fell silent as the implications sank in. The Zephyrian hegemony had sent their best fleet against what they thought was a primitive enemy. Instead, they had encountered a species that treated impossibility as a challenge to overcome. What happens now? General Crixon asked. Now you go home, Chun said. You tell your leaders exactly what happened here. You explain that this was not our main fleet. These were not our best tactics, and this was not our most advanced technology. And if they don't believe us? Chun's smile was cold and utterly without mercy. Then they'll find out the hard way what happens when humans stop playing games. She stood up and walked to the viewport, showing the wreckage of the Zephyrian fleet. You came here thinking you were hunters setting a trap for prey. But you made one critical mistake. What mistake? Vexstar asked. Chun turned to face him, and her eyes held the same predatory gleam that had shaped human evolution for millions of years. You assumed we were the prey. 3 days later, Vexstar stood on the bridge of a damaged but functional Zephyrian cruiser, watching human ships escort his surviving fleet toward the edge of the system. The humans had kept their promise. They were being allowed to leave with their lives and enough ships to carry the survivors home. Admiral, General Crixon said quietly, what do we tell the hegemony? Vexstar looked at the tactical display showing the human fleet. Even now, he could see new ships arriving to replace the ones that had fought in the battle. The humans seemed to have an endless supply of vessels and crews. "We tell them the truth," he said finally. "We tell them that we are not fighting primitives. We are fighting a species that has spent millions of years learning how to survive impossible situations. Will they listen?" Vextar thought about the battle he had just survived. He remembered the human ships emerging from hiding places that should have been impossible to use. He remembered weapons that should not have worked and tactics that should not have succeeded. "If they're smart, they will," he said. "If they're not, then the galaxy is about to learn why humans call their home world a death planet, and why that's exactly where they learn to fight." As his ship limped toward hyperspace, Vextar wondered if the hegemony would be wise enough to avoid further conflict with humanity. Somehow, he doubted it. And that meant the galaxy was about to discover what happened when a species that had evolved to survive anything decided that something needed to die. The trap had been perfect. The planning had been flawless. The execution had been masterful. But they had made one simple mistake. They had assumed humans were like everyone else. They were not. And now the entire galaxy would learn what that difference meant.